An older black female, CEO, walked into the hotel she had founded, only to be met immediately by the young receptionist's cold, discriminatory gaze, who refused her a room solely based on her modest appearance and skin color. Without causing a scene or engaging in any argument, she calmly made one phone call and forced those who discriminated against her to pay the price for their mistake. The night gently descended over the city of Chicago, the sparkling lights from the skyscrapers reflecting onto the peaceful Chicago River outside the famous Grand American Hotel, its grand lobby adorned in splendor. A yellow taxi quietly came to a stop. A woman stepped out of the car and stood still, gazing up at the luxurious building, her eyes holding something both familiar and distant. She was Elanor Johnson, 65 years old, a black American woman who had once been hailed as a symbol of success and inspiration in modern America. Elanor was the founder of the renowned Johnson Luxury Hotels chain, which owned over 20 luxurious properties stretching from the East Coast to the West Coast. But few knew that the Grand American was the first hotel she had built with her own hands, where she had once shared the deepest bond with her youth and ambitious dreams. Far from the image often seen in the media, adorned in glamorous dresses and sparkling diamonds, tonight Elanor wore only a simple thin woolen coat, underneath which was an elegant light blue dress, soft leather shoes, and a cream-colored scarf to keep warm against the cool Chicago breeze. Her gray hair was carefully styled into a neat bun, and her gaze, calm but carrying an inexplicable authority, conveyed a quiet strength. She stood there for a few seconds, silently recalling all the memories she once had here, memories of a young woman eager to be accepted and prove herself amidst countless challenges, racial prejudices, and gender stereotypes. Elanor gently exhaled a breath filled with emotions that no one but herself could truly understand. Then, slowly, she walked inside the hotel, carrying only a small worn brown leather handbag showing signs of age. The hotel lobby still shone as beautifully as ever, the elegant crystal chandelier casting reflections onto the polished marble floor. Wealthy guests in fine attire bustled in and out, the piano's melody softly playing, blending with the refined voices and laughter from every corner of the large lobby. But Elanor did not draw attention. She was not there as a VIP or a high-ranking executive, but simply as an ordinary guest seeking rest after a long, exhausting journey. Her eyes were filled with affection as she looked around, sensing the familiar breath of the walls she had once chosen the paint colors for, the sofas where she had waited for the first guests, the potted plants she had carefully placed to bring life to the space. Elanor smiled gently and approached the front desk, her steps firm yet quiet, like a breath drawing no attention from the staff or the other guests around her. She did not rush to speak, instead silently waiting for the receptionist to lift their gaze, her posture carrying a quiet respect and humility, a hallmark of the experienced older woman she was. What she did not know was that her quiet and humble presence would set off an unexpected situation, a situation that would make everyone reassess their deep-seated prejudices, beginning with a seemingly ordinary phrase, but one that would cause a ripple throughout the most famous hotel in Chicago. Elanor gently placed her small handbag on the front desk, her fingers lightly brushing the smooth, cold marble surface, which she still remembered in intricate detail from when she had chosen it over 30 years ago. Elanor stood patiently, her gaze calm and unhurried, focused on the young woman behind the computer screen who was absorbed in texting on her phone, her expression slightly furrowed as though something had just disturbed her mood. After a few seconds, the young receptionist finally looked up, her eyes widening with a hint of confusion, as if she had just realized Eleanor's unexpected presence. Quickly regaining her professional composure, the receptionist flashed a polite, neutral smile and softly asked, her tone courteous but somewhat lacking warmth, "Hello, how can I assist you?" Elanor smiled faintly and replied in her characteristic warm, deep voice, one that had helped her persuade countless business partners throughout her years of success in the ever-challenging world of hospitality. "I'd like to check in. I need a room reserved for VIP guests. My name is Elanor Johnson." The receptionist quickly scanned Elanor from head to toe, her gaze shifting slightly. The initial friendliness faded fast. Her perfectly groomed eyebrows raised slightly, and her meticulously manicured fingers flew across the keyboard. But after just a few seconds, she stopped. The young woman frowned, seemingly filled with doubt. Her voice grew more stiff and formal, yet colder. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson, but I've checked, and the hotel is fully booked." Elanor was slightly taken aback, but remained calm, responding gently, her voice still soft and filled with patience. "There must be some mistake. The Grand American always reserves a special room for me." Jessica Carter, the receptionist, had just turned 25 and had grown up in a wealthy suburban neighborhood of Chicago. Throughout her childhood and adolescence, Jessica had been carefully shielded within exclusive environments, rarely ever encountering situations she deemed confusing like this one. To her, a true VIP guest would never appear in simple attire and display such an overly humble demeanor. In her still naive and inexperienced mind, Jessica had unknowingly developed a bias. Wealthy and powerful individuals had to show their status through flashy clothes, expensive jewelry, and an overwhelming attitude. It was this unintentional bias that caused Jessica to look at Elanor with a skeptical, indifferent gaze. She thought to herself, maybe this is just an older woman trying to use someone else's name to get a free luxury room. Quickly, Jessica made up her mind, repeating gently but firmly, "I'm very sorry, but our hotel is fully booked today." Eleanor's gaze faltered slightly, showing a hint of disappointment. She wasn't angry, nor was she accusatory. She simply felt a bit sad as the familiar worn-out feeling of being doubted. A black woman of her age, dressed simply, crept up once again in her life. Elanor stared deeply into the young woman's eyes, noticing the arrogance of youthful confidence, the inexperience, and the assumptions that led the young receptionist to this mistaken judgment. But Elanor didn't argue or try to prove anything. At that moment, she simply nodded, offering a smile filled with the compassion only someone who had weathered many storms could give. "I understand. Thank you." With that, Elanor stepped back, not rushing to leave, but standing by the edge of the front desk. She calmly pulled out her phone from her slightly worn brown handbag, dialing a familiar number. A soft, composed voice answered on the other end. "Hello. Thomas, it's me, Elanor. I'm at the Grand American, and I've encountered a small issue with my room. Could you please check it out for me?" The call was brief, and Elanor hung up, standing still as she waited silently, her eyes gently looking out across the hotel lobby, where other guests were being warmly greeted by the staff without any trouble. On the other side of the front desk, Jessica stole a glance at Elanor, her gaze a mix of hesitation and lingering suspicion. The young woman shook her head slightly, as if reaffirming to herself that she had acted entirely correctly. What Jessica didn't know was that in just a few minutes, when that phone call began to take effect, all of her assumptions and the beliefs she had so firmly held would be completely overturned, and she herself would have to face the expectedly bitter truth. Elanor put her phone back in her bag, still standing calmly in place, her eyes gently directed toward the front door as if to avoid causing any further discomfort to the young receptionist behind the counter. But her calm demeanor and gentle handling only made Jessica more suspicious. Jessica silently observed Elanor from behind the desk, a strange sense of discomfort rising within her. She could understand why a woman who claimed to be a VIP guest, even asserting that she was the founder of their hotel, appeared so unusually modest, from her simple scarf to her worn-out leather shoes. She didn't resemble the elite in any way, luxurious, powerful, and always knowing how to attract attention. Unable to hide her impatience, Jessica quickly walked over to a colleague of hers, lowering her voice in frustration. "Do you see that woman? She just claimed to be Elanor Johnson, the founder of our hotel." Jessica's tone carried a hint of sarcasm. Her colleague, a young man named Luke Thompson, glanced at Elanor, furrowing his brows as he responded, "Elanor Johnson? She must be mistaken. No one like her could be Elanor Johnson. She doesn't look anything like what I imagined." Jessica nodded slightly, reinforcing her initial judgment. She silently congratulated herself for turning the woman away in her naive thinking. She was sure Elanor was merely pretending to be someone important to gain some sort of privilege from the luxury hotel. Elanor remained still, her gaze peaceful as she took in her surroundings, her hands gently placed before her as though waiting for something familiar. Soon after, from down the hotel hallway, a man in his 40s walked briskly toward the front desk. He wore a sharp suit with a small name tag reading Michael Harris, shift manager. Michael was a young and ambitious manager, having been at the Grand American for less than 6 months, but always nurturing dreams of rising higher in the company. He was quite meticulous, always careful and afraid of making mistakes. When Jessica reported that an elderly woman was claiming to be the founder of the hotel, Michael immediately felt suspicious and decided to handle the situation as quickly and safely as possible by refusing her. He approached Elanor with a polite expression but a distant tone. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Michael Harris, the shift manager here. I was informed that there seems to be some confusion regarding your reservation. May I have your full name, please?" Elanor answered calmly, without hesitation or any sign of tension. "Elanor Johnson." Michael paused for a moment, slightly furrowing his brow before speaking in a firm tone. "I'm very sorry, but your name isn't on today's VIP list. Furthermore, our hotel is fully booked tonight. If you'd like, I could suggest another hotel nearby." Elanor gave a faint, sad smile, but patiently explained once more, "I am Elanor Johnson, the founder of this Grand American Hotel. Since its opening, the hotel has always kept a room reserved for me without needing a prior reservation." Michael looked at Elanor again, his gaze briefly flickering with uncertainty, but then quickly returned to its cold indifference. In his cautious mind, there was no way such a modestly dressed older woman could be Elanor Johnson, the living legend in the hotel industry he had heard so much about. Michael believed the woman must have been mistaken or was deliberately impersonating someone to claim special privileges. He lowered his head slightly, polite but firm. "Sorry, but there must be some misunderstanding. Elanor Johnson is a very well-known figure, and she's not currently in Chicago. I believe you may have confused her with someone else." Jessica stood beside him, feeling more confident now that the manager shared her perspective, but Elanor didn't show any sign of anger or argument. She gently nodded, as if she had anticipated this situation, then quietly took out her phone again, making a quick call to another important person. "Hello, Anthony? I'm having a small issue at the Grand American. It seems your staff doesn't believe I'm Elanor Johnson. Perhaps you should handle this yourself." Eleanor's soft yet powerful voice made both Jessica and Michael feel uneasy. They exchanged a confused glance. Michael tried to maintain his calm, but deep down, a sense of unease began to rise, a feeling he wasn't accustomed to when dealing with situations at the hotel. The tension suddenly spread through the front desk area like an invisible wave, slowly rising, ready to break open. In the moments to come, both Jessica and Michael had no idea that with a simple phone call, Elanor would soon set in motion a storm that would engulf the entire hotel, a storm neither of them could have ever expected. Michael took a step back, his expression showing a hint of discomfort as he watched Elanor end the call with an unusual calmness. In his mind, the image of a powerful, glamorous Elanor Johnson did not align with the modest, humble woman standing in front of him. Michael was sure that this woman was not only mistaken, but also had an ulterior motive to cause trouble. As a young manager, he couldn't let anything tarnish the hotel's reputation, especially on a busy evening like this. With a quick but firm decision, Michael turned to Jessica and spoke quietly. "Jessica, call security. We need to handle this as quickly as possible." Jessica hesitated for a moment, but quickly picked up the phone. Less than a minute later, 2 tall men in hotel security uniforms entered the lobby area. They didn't say a word, just stood still near Elanor, close enough for her to clearly feel the pressure of their presence. Other guests in the lobby began to notice the odd scene. An older couple sitting nearby whispered to each other, their eyes fixed on Elanor with suspicion. A group of younger guests standing by the door turned to look as well, curious about the situation. The soft sound of the piano from the far corner of the lobby seemed to fade amid the increasing murmur of whispered conversations. "What's going on?" a well-dressed woman whispered to her husband. He shook his head, his gaze never leaving Elanor. "She seems to be causing some trouble." A voice, quiet but loud enough to be heard, came from behind, reaching Eleanor's ears, causing a sharp pang of hurt in her heart. Elanor stood at the center of the scrutiny and doubt, maintaining absolute composure, though deep within her memories of her early difficult days of building her career came rushing back. In those days, she had endured countless similar looks of suspicion, eyes that judged her not on her abilities, but on her appearance, her skin color, and her gender. "Ma'am," Michael spoke again, this time more firmly, as if trying to make it clear that he was the one in control of the situation. "I would appreciate your cooperation. We truly don't want any trouble here." Elanor looked calmly into Michael's eyes and responded in a soft yet sharp voice, filled with the strength of experience and self-respect. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm waiting for the person I just called to resolve this matter." Michael frowned, as if feeling challenged by Eleanor's calm demeanor. He glanced at the two security guards, subtly signaling them to move a little closer. The movement of the guards made the guests in the lobby even more curious. All eyes were now on Elanor, the older woman with a modest appearance being treated as though she were a troublemaker among the crowd. A few people began lifting their phones, recording the tense scene. The murmurs grew louder. Michael noticed this, and a sense of unease began to settle in. He lowered his voice, tried to maintain professionalism, but sounding increasingly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Johnson, I think you should understand the current situation. If you don't cooperate, I will have to ask security to escort you out." Jessica stood just behind him, feeling a sense of unease as the situation seemed more serious than she had anticipated, but she still couldn't believe that the humble woman standing before her was actually the legendary Elanor Johnson, the founder. Jessica whispered into Michael's ear, clearly flustered, "Maybe we should wait a little longer." "What if she really is?" Michael immediately cut her off with a cold stare. He didn't want to be swayed at this moment, especially when he was certain he was doing the right thing to protect the hotel's image. "Jessica, just follow the orders. Don't pay too much attention." Elanor remained silent, her breathing steady, but her heart filled with sorrow and disappointment. What could have been a simple matter was being pushed too far due to misguided prejudices. But she knew well that there are moments in life that cannot be avoided, and she had decided to face it silently, waiting for the phone call she made to take effect. The tension in the lobby was palpable. The two security guards stood like statues. Michael kept his cold expression, and Jessica tried to avoid Eleanor's gaze. The curious guests stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen next. None of them could have imagined that just minutes from now, the situation would completely change, and they would witness a shocking truth that would overturn everything they had just believed. Amid the tense atmosphere spreading throughout the hotel lobby, Elanor stood quietly, her eyes gazing into the distance as if trying to avoid the stares directed at her. But the more she tried to avoid it, the more she felt the sharpness of each scrutinizing gaze. The whispers, filled with doubt, surrounded her, each one like a sharp blade cutting into her memories, stirring up things that seemed long buried. In that moment, Elanor felt herself being pulled back to the difficult days of her youth when she was just in her 20s, a young woman full of ambition stepping into the hotel industry. Elanor clearly remembered that she had nothing but dreams, bare hands, and a steel will forged in the face of harsh prejudices about race and gender. At that time, a young black woman entering the business world, especially in the luxury hotel industry, was almost unthinkable. Hard to accept. She could still vividly recall the first time she went to a large hotel in Manhattan, attending an important conference as an intern. Before she could even step into the grand lobby, Elanor was stopped by a security guard with a cold gaze and a voice she would never forget. Employees used the side entrance. At that moment, Elanor quietly walked to the side door with a heavy heart and teary eyes, trying to swallow her hurt and the deep insult to her self-esteem. That was just the beginning of many similar experiences, where she was overlooked in meetings, forgotten in promotion discussions, and doubted whenever she boldly spoke up with her ideas. There were nights when she returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn, sitting alone in the corner of her dark room, silently crying, wondering if she was wrong for trying to enter this world. But then it was in those painful moments that she reminded herself, I can't give up. I will prove that a black woman can succeed and stand equal to anyone. The memories flooded back so clearly that Elanor instinctively placed her hand on her chest, where her heart was racing with emotion. She exhaled softly, her gaze still calm, but deep inside, a wave of sadness rose like an unrelenting tide. She could hardly believe that after more than 30 years of building her first hotel with her own hands and a heart full of passion, today she was standing here, right in the place she created, and once again facing the same doubt and disdain from the past. Michael stood there, his cold eyes scanning Elanor bit by bit, as if she were an unwelcome nuisance that he was eager to rid himself of. Jessica, beside him, was no longer as comfortable as before. She began to feel something was wrong, but still lacked the courage to change her initial opinion. The guests around them continued to whisper. Elanor inadvertently overheard the half-formed but painful remarks from the crowd, the biased speculations that made her heart ache. She must want something for free. Who would believe a woman dressed like that is the founder? Those words were like invisible daggers, cutting deep into her heart. Elanor had once thought that after reaching the pinnacle of success, she would no longer have to endure such things. But today, she realized that prejudice never truly disappears. It remains, always ready to reappear at any time with anyone. Elanor took a deep breath, holding back the tears in her eyes as she faced the cold stares of the strangers around her. She had been through too much to know that sometimes silence is the greatest strength a person can have. But no matter how hard she tried to remain calm, Elanor could not deny that her heart was trembling with deep hurt. She silently wondered, why? As a black woman, no matter how successful or hard I try, do I still have to prove myself over and over again? Standing still in silence, Elanor waited for that important call to have effect. She knew that in just a moment, everything would be clear. But at that moment, the painful feelings of the past were once again overshadowing everything. Once again, Elanor Johnson had to stand firm with her self-respect and dignity, facing the harsh prejudices that life seemed unwilling to let go of. As Elanor was still lost in her sorrowful memories, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hotel corridor, causing her to look up. Two men in elegant suits quickly appeared, their faces filled with anxiety, their expressions tense as they made their way toward the front desk area. Instantly, Elanor recognized them. Thomas Reed, the vice president of the corporation, and Anthony Price, the regional executive director for the Midwest, the two men she had just called. Thomas Reed led the way, his breath heavy from having run down from the upper floors. When he saw Elanor standing silently between two security guards, his eyes immediately filled with panic. He stopped, stunned for a few seconds before quickly advancing toward her with a look of remorse and concern. Mrs. Johnson, I am terribly sorry. I never expected this to happen. Right behind Thomas was Anthony Price, his face pale, his voice trembling as he realized Elanor was standing there under the scrutinizing gazes of everyone around. Elanor, are you okay? I am so sorry. This is entirely our fault. The unexpected appearance and the respectful, anxious demeanor of the two powerful men immediately shifted the atmosphere in the lobby. The murmurs of gossip from earlier quieted down, replaced by stunned silence. All eyes now turned from Elanor to the two high-ranking members of the corporation, and then back to Elanor with expressions of surprise and clear remorse. Jessica stood frozen behind the front desk, her hand instinctively lifting to cover her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. The cold words she had used to turn away, Elanor echoed back in her mind, causing a chill to run down her spine. She turned to look at Michael, realizing that he stood still, his face ashen, beads of sweat beginning to form on his forehead. All the confidence and firmness he had shown earlier vanished, leaving a trembling Michael confronted with the truth now laid bare. Michael immediately took a few steps forward, his voice stammering with panic. Mr. Reed, Mr. Price, I had no idea this was Mrs. Johnson. Thomas Reed raised his hand to silence Michael, his eyes stern, filled with disappointment and anger. His voice dropped low, clearly enunciating each word. Harris, do you know who you're standing in front of? This is Mrs. Elanor Johnson, the founder of the Grand American Hotel and our entire corporation. At that moment, Anthony Price turned toward Jessica, his gaze severe, making her shrink back. His voice was cold. Carter, why didn't you check the VIP guest list before acting so thoughtlessly? Jessica went silent, unable to speak a word. The prejudices she had been so sure of came crashing down in an instant. She wondered why she had so easily judged a person based only on their appearance. The two security guards quickly stepped back, showing their confusion and embarrassment as they realized the true situation. The guests who had been standing around now looked at Elanor with an entirely different gaze, shifting from suspicion to respect tinged with a little shame. Some had even taken out their phones to capture this unexpected scene, whispering among themselves, unable to believe that the simple elderly woman standing there was the legendary Elanor Johnson. Elanor remained standing there, her expression calm but full of authority, subtly signaling for Thomas and Anthony to regain their composure. She spoke gently, her voice soft, yet carrying such command that the entire room fell into complete silence. I do not need any apologies or explanations. I only hope that this will be the last time something like this happens at my hotel. Thomas and Anthony immediately bowed their heads, their voices in unison. Yes, Mrs. Johnson. Elanor cast one last glance at Jessica and Michael. She didn't scold them, nor was she angry. She simply looked at them with a deep, thoughtful gaze, one that was enough to make the two young people understand the grave mistake they had just made. At that moment, no one in the hotel lobby could take their eyes off Elanor Johnson. They realized they had just witnessed a rare moment, a profound lesson about the rush to judge others based on appearances and mistaken prejudices. And in that moment, everything changed. Elanor didn't need to say another word. The truth that had just been revealed spoke louder than any reprimand she could have given. As soon as Elanor finished speaking, Thomas Reed immediately turned to Michael and Jessica, his voice stern and firm, no longer showing any patience. Mr. Harris, Miss Carter, I order both of you to prepare a VIP room for Mrs. Johnson right now. Ensure everything is arranged perfectly. Michael lowered his head, his shoulders visibly tense, his face reddened with embarrassment and fear for the mistake he had just made. He no longer dared to look Elanor in the eye, only nodding repeatedly, his voice trembling. Yes, yes, sir. I will have it prepared immediately. Jessica stood behind, slightly stepping back, her hands trembling as she adjusted her collar, trying to hide the growing unease in her heart. The situation had escalated far beyond her initial expectations, and she was beginning to feel the full weight of the mistake caused by her own prejudice. Other hotel staff soon began to realize what had just occurred. The atmosphere throughout the entire Grand American Hotel quickly shifted. The initial murmurs of doubt turned into whispers of regret and concern. Everyone understood that a mistake like this, especially insulting the founder of the corporation, would not be easily forgiven. This is definitely going to reach the top leadership, a young female employee whispered to her colleague. Michael and Jessica might lose their jobs, her colleague replied with deep worry. Elanor looked around, sensing the strong shift in the atmosphere, but she maintained her calm and composure. Instead of becoming angry or offering further criticism, she chose to remain silent, observing quietly, waiting to see whether this lesson would truly be absorbed as she had hoped. Thomas Reed turned to Elanor again, speaking gently, full of respect and apology. Madam, the VIP room will be ready in just a few minutes. I hope you can forgive this incident. We assure you this will never happen again. Elanor gently nodded in response, her voice small but clearly resonating in the absolute silence of the hotel lobby. What I need is not a promise. What I expect is change. Thomas and Anthony immediately understood the importance of Eleanor's words and nodded in agreement. They knew that the experience of the previous night would lead to significant changes in the hotel's training and approach toward all guests, regardless of their appearance. The Grand American Hotel would never be the same. Real change had begun. Elanor stood still, her expression calm, but her heart heavy with disappointment as she faced the cold indifference of the hotel staff. The moment she had been waiting for had come, yet it was marred by the weight of prejudice that she had encountered throughout her life. She could feel the eyes of the guests upon her, their judgment lingering in the air like a thick fog. In that moment, she wanted to show them that she was not just an ordinary woman. She was Elanor Johnson, the founder of this hotel, a woman who had fought against the odds and built a successful empire from the ground up. Yet here she was, reduced to a mere shadow of her accomplishments, simply because of her appearance. This was not the first time she had faced such discrimination, but each instance cut just as deeply as the last. As she stood there, Eleanor's thoughts turned to the young receptionist, Jessica. She could see the skepticism in Jessica's eyes, the way her brows furrowed in doubt. It pained Elanor to think that Jessica, too, was a product of her environment, raised in a world where appearances dictated worth. Elanor wished she could show her the truth, that dignity and value do not rest solely on outward appearances, but are rooted in one's character and actions. Meanwhile, Jessica felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had been so confident in her judgment, so sure that her assumptions were correct. But now, seeing the tension in the lobby and the arrival of her superiors, doubt crept in. She glanced at Michael, who looked as uncomfortable as she felt, and she wondered if she had misjudged Elanor. The atmosphere shifted as whispers spread among the guests. They had noticed the tension, and curiosity filled the room. What was happening? Why was this older woman being treated like a troublemaker? Elanor could sense their intrigue, their eyes flicking back and forth between her and the security guards. It was a familiar scene, one she had lived through countless times before. In that moment of silence, Elanor took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She realized that this was not just an ordinary encounter. It was an opportunity to shed light on the biases that still existed in society. She could either let the moment pass or use it to make a statement. Eleanor's resolve strengthened. She would not allow this situation to define her. Instead, she would turn it into a lesson, both for herself and for those around her. She would show them that true strength lies in grace and dignity, even in the face of adversity. As she stood there, a calmness washed over her. She would not engage in anger or resentment. Instead, she would wait for the right moment to speak, to assert her identity not just as a founder, but as a woman who had overcome obstacles and who deserved respect. Jessica, still grappling with her internal conflict, felt a shift within her. The more she observed Elanor, the more she realized that her preconceived notions were being challenged. Perhaps this was a moment to learn rather than to judge. And so, as the tension lingered in the air, Elanor prepared herself to speak, determined to make her voice heard. Not just for herself, but for all those who had ever felt underestimated or overlooked. This was her chance to advocate for understanding and compassion, to remind others that every individual carries a story worth hearing. The moment was ripe for change, and Elanor was ready to seize it. As the tension in the lobby reached its peak, Elanor took a deep breath and prepared to confront the situation with calm authority. She understood that this was not merely about her. It was about challenging the biases that had persisted in the hotel and society at large. She stood tall, her presence commanding the attention of everyone in the room. Michael, still flustered, approached her again, his voice shaky as he attempted to reassert control over the situation. "Mrs. Johnson, I assure you that we're looking into this matter, but I need you to cooperate with us." Elanor met his gaze with unwavering confidence. "Cooperation begins with respect, Michael. I'm not here to cause trouble, but I will not allow my identity to be dismissed." Her voice was steady, resonating with the authority that came from years of hard work and determination. Jessica watched, her heart racing as she felt the weight of Eleanor's words. She had underestimated this woman, and now, standing before her, was someone who embodied strength and resilience. The realization hit Jessica like a wave, crashing against the walls of her previous judgments. Elanor continued, her tone firm yet composed. I have built this hotel with my own hands. There has always been a reserved room for me here, without the need for a reservation. I deserve to be treated with the same courtesy as any other guest. The room fell silent, the murmurs of the guests fading into the background as they absorbed her words. Eleanor's story was not just hers. It was a reflection of the struggles many faced, a testament to the strength required to overcome prejudice. As Michael processed her statement, his demeanor began to shift. The realization of who Elanor truly was started to dawn on him. But pride and a desire to maintain authority kept him from admitting his mistake. Instead, he glanced nervously at Jessica, who was visibly shaken by the unfolding events. Jessica stepped forward, her voice trembling. I didn't know, Mrs. Johnson. I should have checked the VIP list. The sincerity in her tone was evident, and as she spoke, her eyes filled with regret. Elanor turned her gaze to Jessica, recognizing the young woman's struggle with her own biases. It is easy to judge based on appearances, Jessica, but remember, everyone carries a story within them. It is our duty to see beyond the surface. With those words, Elanor not only addressed Jessica, but also reminded everyone present of the importance of empathy and understanding. The atmosphere began to shift. The initial skepticism was replaced with a sense of respect and reflection. Feeling the weight of the moment, Michael finally acknowledged his error. Mrs. Johnson, I am truly sorry for this misunderstanding. I will ensure that we correct this immediately. Elanor nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement, yet she knew this was only the beginning. Apologies are a good start, but what matters is the action that follows. This hotel must be a place of respect for everyone, regardless of their appearance. As she spoke, the guests around her began to realize the depth of the situation. They had witnessed a powerful moment of truth, one that challenged their preconceived notions. With the tension easing, Elanor felt a sense of empowerment wash over her. She understood that this encounter could lead to meaningful change, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. As she stood there, she felt a renewed sense of purpose, a desire to advocate for others who had been silenced by prejudice. The realization that her presence could spark change ignited a fire within her. With each passing moment, Elanor was determined to take this experience and transform it into an opportunity for growth, not just for herself, but for the entire hotel staff. This was her chance to pave the way for understanding and compassion, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the same doubts and prejudices she had faced. Elanor was ready to take a stand, not just for herself, but for all those who felt unseen and unheard. In that pivotal moment, she knew she was not just a founder. She was a voice for change, and she would make sure that her legacy would be one of respect, dignity, and empowerment for all. As the atmosphere in the lobby began to shift, Elanor felt a wave of determination wash over her. The murmurs of the guests were replaced with a contemplative silence, each person reflecting on the scene unfolding before them. Elanor took a moment to gather her thoughts, ready to address not only Michael and Jessica, but also the entire crowd that had gathered, drawn in by the unexpected drama. Thank you for your willingness to rectify this situation, Elanor began, her voice steady and resonant. But let's not stop at apologies. Today, I hope we can engage in a real conversation about respect and understanding. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who walks through these doors. Her words hung in the air, penetrating the hearts and minds of those present. The guests, once quick to judge, now found themselves reconsidering their perceptions. Elanor noticed several nods and thoughtful expressions among them, indicating a shift in their understanding. I have dedicated my life to building this hotel chain, not just as a business, but as a sanctuary for all, Elanor continued, her gaze sweeping across the audience. Every guest deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter how they look or what they wear. We must challenge our biases and learn to see each other for who we truly are. Jessica listened intently, her heart racing as she absorbed Eleanor's words. She felt a mix of shame and admiration, realizing how her previous assumptions had blinded her to the true essence of the woman standing before her. The lesson she was learning was profound, a reminder of the importance of compassion over judgment. Michael, too, felt a shift within himself. Eleanor's calm strength and the conviction in her voice sparked a realization that he had a responsibility not just to uphold the hotel's reputation, but to foster an environment of inclusion and respect. Elanor paused for a moment, allowing her message to resonate before she continued. This incident is a reflection of a deeper issue that we must confront. We all have biases, some conscious, some unconscious. It is our duty to acknowledge them and work towards change. Let us use this moment as a catalyst for growth, not just for this hotel, but for ourselves as individuals. The crowd began to murmur amongst themselves, the energy in the room shifting from defensive to receptive. Elanor could see that her words were taking root, planting seeds of understanding in the minds of those who had previously doubted her. Let's commit to training our staff to recognize and challenge their biases. I want us to create programs that emphasize empathy, understanding, and respect for every individual who walks through our doors, Elanor proposed, her eyes sparkling with hope and determination. Michael nodded, feeling a newfound sense of purpose. We can implement training sessions that focus on diversity and inclusion. We'll ensure that every employee understands the value of treating all guests with respect. Elanor smiled, appreciating his commitment. Thank you, Michael. This is a step in the right direction. Together, we can build a culture of respect that reflects the values this hotel was founded upon. As the conversation continued, Elanor felt a sense of empowerment. This was not just a moment of confrontation. It was an opportunity for real change. She could see that the guests, too, were beginning to engage in the dialogue, sharing their own experiences and reflections on bias and prejudice. The lobby, once filled with tension and skepticism, transformed into a space of openness and understanding. Eleanor's courage to speak out had sparked a collective realization that everyone had a role to play in creating a more inclusive environment. As she concluded her address, Elanor looked around at the faces of the guests and staff, her heart swelling with hope. Let us remember that every person carries a story worth hearing. By embracing our differences and treating one another with kindness, we can create a lasting impact that extends far beyond these walls. With those final words, Elanor felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had not only asserted her identity, but had also ignited a movement for change. The journey ahead would require commitment and effort, but she was ready to lead the way, ensuring that the Grand American Hotel would be a place where respect and dignity reigned supreme for all. As the discussions in the lobby began to settle, Elanor felt a sense of accomplishment mingled with hope. She had successfully transformed a moment of prejudice into an opportunity for growth, but she knew that the real work was just beginning. Change would not happen overnight. It required ongoing commitment and dedication from everyone involved. The following morning, the sun rose gently over Chicago, casting a warm glow through the glass windows of the Grand American Hotel's meeting room. Elanor arrived early, her mind buzzing with thoughts about the previous day's events and the potential for change that lay ahead. She could feel the atmosphere in the room was charged with anticipation as the senior management team gathered. When the clock struck 8, Elanor calmly took her seat at the center of the table, her presence commanding attention. She glanced around at the faces of the leadership team, Michael, Jessica, Thomas, and Anthony, each displaying a mixture of anxiety and determination. Elanor sensed their eagerness to address the issues that had come to light. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady yet inviting. "I know none of us wanted to have a meeting like this, but sometimes it is the unexpected events that give us an opportunity to reflect on ourselves and our values." The room fell silent. All eyes focused on Elanor as she continued. What happened yesterday was not merely an unfortunate incident. It exposed a deeper issue within our organization, an issue of prejudice and misunderstanding. We have a responsibility to ensure that this hotel embodies respect and dignity for every guest, regardless of their appearance. Michael shifted in his seat, his expression serious as he absorbed Eleanor's words. We recognize that we fell short of those values yesterday, and we must take immediate steps to address it. Elanor nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement. This isn't just about fixing a mistake. It's about fundamentally changing the way we operate. I propose we develop a comprehensive training program focused not only on professional skills, but also on empathy and respect for all individuals who walk through our doors. Thomas leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. I completely agree, Elanor. We need to create an environment where every employee understands the importance of seeing beyond appearances. Elanor could feel the momentum building in the room. Our training should include real stories and experiences that illustrate the impact of bias. We need our staff to connect on a human level with our guests and understand that everyone has a unique story worth hearing. The team engaged in discussion, brainstorming ideas on how to implement these changes effectively. Jessica, feeling empowered by Eleanor's leadership, suggested incorporating workshops that allowed employees to share personal experiences and learn from one another. This could foster a deeper sense of community within our team, she said. Elanor smiled at Jessica's input, recognizing her growth. Exactly, Jessica. By sharing our stories, we can break down barriers and build a culture of understanding. This is about more than just improving our service. It's about fostering a sense of belonging for everyone. As the meeting progressed, Elanor felt a renewed sense of hope. The discussions were not just focused on corrective measures, but were rooted in a desire for genuine change. She could see that her vision for a more inclusive and respectful hotel was starting to take shape. Let's commit to regular assessments of our progress, Elanor said, her voice firm. I want to ensure that we are not just paying lip service to these ideals, but actively working towards them. We owe it to our guests, our staff, and ourselves. The team nodded in agreement, their faces reflecting a shared determination to move forward. Elanor knew that this was just the beginning. Real change would take time, but she was confident that with commitment and collaboration, they could create a lasting impact. As the meeting wrapped up, Elanor felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had not only addressed the challenges they faced, but had also inspired a collective commitment to change. The Grand American Hotel was on the brink of a transformation, one that would ensure respect and dignity were at the forefront of their operations. As she left the meeting room, Elanor couldn't help but smile. She had planted the seeds of change, and now it was time to nurture them. She believed in the power of her team to rise above their biases and embrace a future where everyone was treated with the respect they deserved. The road ahead would be challenging, but Elanor was ready to lead the way, ensuring that her vision for a more inclusive hotel became a reality.